Hello, hello. My name is Connor Mack, and this is Job Jumpers, a podcast for those of us who are stuck in the trap of jumping from shitty job to shitty job. Today on the show, I have John from the Midwest. We talk about our common history of working in hotels and all the nightmares that brings. He tells me about working in record stores, working at Aldi, and a lot of cool side hustles that help him get by in between jobs. So without further ado, let's throw it over to my conversation with John from the Midwest. All right, everybody, welcome to Job Jumpers. Today on the podcast, I have my new friend, John. And John has a pretty interesting story to tell. We kind of share some commonalities. You know, we've kind of both worked around hospitality. So first off, John, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for taking time out to talk with me tonight.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course. So I don't want to disclose your location. Do you want to say you're in the Midwest? Is that accurate?
Yeah, I'm in the Midwest.
Yeah. So, a little bit, the part of...
Colder part of the Midwest.
Sure. And it's all thanks to you that I realized what time zones were, because that was a concept that was totally foreign to me before I reached out to you. So let's see. Before we get all into the nitty gritty of the podcast, jobs, and all those fun stories. Do you want to just give me a little bit about yourself as a human being? I think a big part of what I want to get into is you take work out of the equation. Take work out of the equation altogether. Because when people ask you what do you do, the first thing that you think of is, oh, I'll tell them what job I have or what my career is. But John, what do you do just as a human being?
I would say music. Music is kind of what I do and what I work with, and it's one of my biggest passions in life. And I've spent my life working in and around music pretty much all my life. But I'm not a musician, so I've worked within the music industry in different roles too. So I've seen kind of different sides. But I've done that often while working in retail or whatever else. But
yeah,
definitely music is my number one passion.
So you're not a musician, but you've kind of worked in the industry and kind of on the outskirts of that industry.
Exactly. Yeah. I've done everything from managing bands to doing weekend tours to doing street teams for record labels to working in record stores to owning a store to working at venues to booking shows at venues to actually paying and settling with the bands, emailing the agents.
Wow.
Just a lot of different aspects. But you see the band's perspective, you see the label's perspective, you see the venue's perspective.
Yeah.
You kind of and they're not all the same. They're not all the same, but they're all after the same thing. But
Sure.
the pie is what it is.
Yeah, and sometimes those parties are at odds with each other. Because I've been reading how a lot of times these days venues will take a cut of the merch, and that's kind of been a big controversy that I've seen.
As someone that's book shows, I would say that has to do with agents being kind of incredibly greedy, in my opinion. You're booking a venue and it has X capacity, and they're asking for a guarantee that is, if you sold out the venue, even at a $25 or $30 ticket, there's not even enough to cover the show. There's no meat on the bone left,
Yeah,
and so you're hoping to depend on the bar. But
exactly.
yeah, so that's their kind of get back some money thing with the contracts now. And I one of my best friends is former bar owner, former music venue owner, and he played in bands, and he was on the different sides too, but he was a musician, and he used to never agree with it, but towards the end he always took a merch cut. But there's so many shows that the band gets, if you have an agent and it's a guaranteed contract, whether there's 10 people there or 100 people there, the band gets paid. The venue just eats it, or the promoter. But yeah, that's my take on that. But
yeah, no, that's a good take, getting it from all these different sides. I mean, I guess as a bar owner or as somebody who books shows or whatever, I kind of feel like, especially in like smaller venues, these days you're kind of like squeezed so hard by like the monolith that is Live Nation, right? That you're desperate for
absolutely
revenue. So yeah, just kind of a crappy situation all around. I'm a big music guy too. What kind of music are you into?
I mean, I'm not going to say like the generic everything, because I'm pretty eclectic. I definitely like rock is my generic number one genre, but I listen to like a lot of Australian garage rock is one of my favorite genres. I really
what is that like?
Have the nostalgia.
King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard?
I mean, you could throw them in there, but there's just like a lot of there's a lot of really good bands right now, like kind of like Skeggs or Violent Soho. The Chats are kind of doing their thing right now.
The Chats is
Dear Seattle,
Smoko,
Tired Lion. Yeah, Chats are the ones that does Smoko. There's so much stuff going out there right now that's just like one of my favorite sounds. But I definitely do some emo and some punk and some pop punk and some shoegaze, but 90s alternative is definitely one of my faves. But when that died, I went more into punk and post-punk and all that.
Yeah. I mean, I like pop punk. Mainstream pop punk was my gateway into everything.
Right.
Same for a lot of people. But I've gotten very into Devo in the last few weeks. I'll just say that. That's kind of been my weirdo obsession.
It's always different to listen to something 5-10 years later, or just maybe it's new to you or you discredited them, but certain points of your life, it kind of sounds different, or maybe it reaches you and it didn't before.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's plenty of bands or albums that I've listened to years ago, and I'm just like, this is not for me. Whatever. I guess people are into it. It's cool, but not my thing. And then I'll pick it up years afterwards, and it hits me at the right place and the right time, and that's just like, damn. So yeah. I mean, I think we definitely have some common ground there, and working with like music. Has that kind of helped you travel a lot? Have you traveled for work a lot?
I mean, I did some weekend jaunts with bands and stuff, and I definitely like worked several work tours, like a few different dates or whatever for a label, but not too much. But my biggest travels were when I had a job professionally driving like drive-away vehicles, and I got to drive all over the country.
That's pretty rad, but also pretty stressful.
It was really weird. I didn't have a lot of freedom for a lot of time. I'd got in trouble and I was on probation, and I finally got off, and I'd pretty much gotten hired from this job before, and my probation officer wouldn't let me do it. And I finally got off, and I did the job, and it was before smartphones, so like the idea now and some of the situations I put myself in the way it like was, is pretty wild, and it wasn't like glamorous because like it wasn't like CDL stuff. So a lot of it was just cars, which is cool, but you had to take the Greyhound out of there, and you take the Greyhound all over America. That's a whole experience in itself. But I got to see all kinds of parts of the country, and like just had the freedom to be in a new city in a different day, and kind of, you had to know a map though. Like you had to. I mean, you can follow road signs pretty well in this country and just kind of go, but there's some people now that can't go anywhere without GPS, and like,
well, yeah,
I mean.
This is where you and I guess are the age gap I guess comes into play, because I'm 29 now, and I've never ever had to use a map, so which is kind of funny because it's only it's we're not that far apart in age really, but
no, but I was probably like 25 when I did that job, and like. They had flip phones and stuff, and like all you could get off it, like it was smart enough where you could get some text in an email, but it wasn't like all I could get was maybe like the bill of lading number and the actual address. But like knowing that actually was pretty good instead of having to go get it faxed or some other old technology. But yeah, I mean, I couldn't just put it in. A lot of times I'd just start driving towards it, and sometimes you just have to call and ask them for directions.
Well, I mean, you'll be better off when all of this craps out and we're stuck with only maps, road signs. So, yeah, I mean, and I'll just be lost, sitting around just waiting for someone to come save me. But anyways, that kind of gives me a good idea of the things you hold dear outside of work. But again, going back to this question, people when they first meet you, they're like, "What do you do?" And that means, what do you do for work? So I'm going to ask you kind of the same question, but in a differently phrased way, which is, what do you say when people ask you what you do for a living?
Usually it kind of depends on where they're asking me. If they're like asking me like while I'm working, or just what the situation is, or like what else do I do, but generally I have an awkward pause and I say, well, I own my own business, and I buy and sell music, and then I also usually work in hotels on the side, or gig economy stuff, or random side hustles. Yeah.
I mean, that's a good answer. You do have things of substance to say. Is it ever awkward when people are like pushing you? They're like, yeah, but what do you really do? It's like.
Well, yeah, and then they're also like, and then I tell them, I sell mostly music, and 10 years ago when, they asked that, and they're like, oh, people still buy vinyl, and now it's like, oh, people still buy CDs. So it's really, but yeah, they still buy both. They still buy plenty of both, and a lot of that stuff from the '90s or after then, like it is pretty desirable. People have, the draw to nostalgia, and a lot of those albums that were pressed on CD from, I don't know, say 2000 to 2010 or whatever, like some of those will never get repressed again. So maybe not even on vinyl. Like, yeah, there's definitely expensive CDs and expensive records, but people do appreciate it. And you got to just remember, it's collectors. Like they're collectibles, and people collect all kinds of stuff. People collect like just so many random things. Like,
yeah. So is a big part of what you do, you flip records, I guess, kind of?
I tend to focus more on CDs myself. It's more of a records game now. I still do some records, absolutely, but it's not one of my main things. It's just so competitive now, and it's really hard to get things at a good enough price to redo it. And and a lot of people hate flippers too, but that's what a record store does. I've literally owned a brick and mortar record store. It's not really any different, but other than you're paying the taxes on it, and and you're still paying the taxes on it when you're doing it, like I am now. Like, that is what it is, and then you're paying the percentage fees to the platforms, whether that be eBay or Amazon or Discogs. But
yeah, I think that's a totally fair way to get by, I guess. I mean, for some reason, I think of it like in a much more positive light than like scalpers, ticket scalpers. I feel like
for sure.
I just feel like they're different morally. I might just be, wrong, but I don't know. I think it's, especially if they're older, more collectible records or CDs. I feel like I feel like that's okay. Things just go up in value as they age too. But yeah, that's very cool. I've got. Oh, actually, when I went to school for broadcasting, like almost a decade ago now, like my final project, which was like a journalism, like I essentially had to, write, film, and edit like a video journalism piece. And what I did was talk about the resurgence of vinyl records, and that was like 10 years ago, and it's only gotten crazier. Like I think they've outsold CDs in the last few years.
Yeah, it's been a weird cycle with that, because I worked at a few stores like at the end of the 90s, early 2000s, and then I had a store about close to a decade later after that, and it was more CDs then, but you could see the vinyl already taken back then, but it took another, I don't know, 5 to 7 years to really hit a resurgence. But some of that's just what's getting pressed too, and then also, like, you'd have to wonder if vinyls would sell a lot more with all the pressing plant delays. Like, that's not really, they'd probably be selling even higher.
Yeah, that's super true. Working in a record store is something I've always wanted to try, and I've kind of gotten the impression, like, they're kind of places that you think you would love to work, but maybe the grass is not actually as green as you think it is, because it's still retail, right?
I feel like that answer is, like, since I've worked at like enough different locations or had different things, it kind of depends on the location. Like, at the end of the day, that assumption about the customers is like completely wrong. Like, the customers are like the coolest people ever, and you connect with all these people you'd probably never meet. Like, I remember, like, the guy was actually a cop, and when Flaming Lips did that, I think it's called like Zyreka, the 4 CD thing, and you're supposed to listen to them all at the same time, but you can listen to just one or two and layer them. Or manipulate the sound. Like, he burned me like a pirated copy of all of them on one CD, which back then, like, was a cool thing. And there's like a lot of lawyers, like, just all kinds of just random people, but you'd meet all these people, and all the employees there, that staff was like actually legit, like Empire Records. Like, it really wasn't like that far off, like, to imagine that.
Pretty rad.
But other stores, if you're the only person working, it's just you and the customers,
Yeah. I mean, I guess the personality difference is kind of what makes it, like, if you're a person that's into music, I guess you kind of, or like into collecting music, you already have different kind of sensibilities. Maybe you're not going to be, an entitled customer or micromanager. I'm sure that does still happen, but I think there's more of a like parallel between more reasonable personalities and maybe.
Well, you're sharing a passion.
Yeah.
And when someone like is sharing that passion, like, that's I don't know, like, that's a pretty big deal. and there are jobs where the customers are cool, but when you work in retail, like I started like grocery retail, and then I worked at a few record stores, and I feel like after I did that, it just kind of maybe it ruined things for me a little bit, just because it's such a great job. And back then, the labels would like, that manager was amazing. He'd like schedule extra people, and then when the record labels would legit call the store and be like, "Oh, Incubus is in town and they're playing the amphitheater. Do you guys want some guest list?"
Oh my God.
And he would just let people go, but most of them like didn't want to go, and so I would go just about anything, but I wouldn't always get the hours I needed. But it got me a lot of opportunities to
Yeah.
see and hang out with bands. Like there were certain labels I was super cool with, because I would play their stuff in the store, and I would make displays for them, or just I also got to like order for the store, and like I definitely helped them sell some albums and put it on end caps, but they hooked it up. Like obviously it didn't pay that well, but the perks in that were like probably the best perks of any job I had.
Yeah, I mean, I would be thrilled with that. That's pretty cool to hear. John, so let's kind of dive into it a little bit deeper here. Would you consider yourself a job jumper?
Yeah. Yeah, no hesitation. Once you work for yourself, or you have your own business, or you start doing it, I feel like you're less inclined to either want to work for someone else, or you've taken a step where you've taken major risks, and you probably failed a couple times too. So you've been at whatever side, but you're not willing to sell yourself for something that's not going anywhere, or not going to reciprocate back, or on empty promises, and trusting people that would just fire you for no reason. And then you've had that happen a few times, and then you just kind of brush it off, and you kind of give what you get back,
Yeah. I mean, I guess you can kind of taste a little bit of freedom, and then it might be hard to go back from that, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. And it's even, it's working under other people and during their hours and their demands, and like, the idea of a lot of these places wanting you to be available for like all weekends or holidays or certain shifts, or like not everyone's schedule is the same, and not everyone has the same goals or life.
It's not reasonable whatsoever, and it's definitely become kind of the standard for most places, at least corporate owned places. And I mean, even like mom and pop shops can be workhorses and unaccommodating, but there's just a lot of freedom in doing your own thing. I think that's super appealing, and that's definitely why a large swath of population is doing kind of gig work, like rideshare or delivery, which is something I've tried my hand at too. And yeah, I mean it's sometimes not super sustainable, but I guess if you work a few different diverse gigs, you can kind of make it work.
Yeah, I think like when you have multiple income streams and you do diversify, it really opens up. And I'm in a different situation too, where I still have inventory for my store that I haven't touched for 10 years, and boxes and boxes and boxes, and just so much stuff that I could probably really take that to the next level. But there's only so much I can do in each day, and I think that's like the worst thing of jobs like that is you can work for 10, 20 hours. You can grind and not get any sales. And like, there's nothing more defeating than having that happen. But, being able to work and, like last night, like literally worked for like 51 minutes and made like almost $45. Like, and if I want to cash it out or pay that right now, I can do that. Like, I don't have to wait 2 weeks in front of some like multimillionaire while I'm like worried I might have gas for the next 2 weeks because I'm driving and fronting them basically my gas money.
Yeah,
you know, like
that's the story of my life. That's every first 2 weeks of a job I've had for the last few years, I'm just like, okay, all right, I really wish this paid every week, but it's always like, you start this job and then it's like you come in at like the end of the last pay cycle, so you have to wait like
the extra week. yeah. I've actually seen some hospitality companies up here either give gas cards, give gas reimbursement weekly or daily, or pay cash for the commute, because most people have to commute, say 20 to 40 miles or minutes, and that they're doing that now. Like, so like it can happen. Like a lot of it, that's a concept in America that like, oh, they won't pay you for your commute. Well, some resort towns will. Some places that want employees that are trying to adapt and do different things, they might attract some good candidates, but they're gonna have to do some things that aren't really conventional right now,
Absolutely. I mean, hopefully companies realize that as they lose, a good bit of their reliable workforce, hopefully they can change things for the better. And some of these work environments are just pressured into being a little bit more worker friendly. So going into even more, I know we've talked quite a bit, just kind of the broad brush strokes of kind of what you've been up to and your story, but I think now is a good point. Let's kind of take it back to the start, and I want to open the floor for you to tell me your job jumping story, how you started out, how you realized that this is what worked for you, and I mean, obviously anything that sticks out to you that you want to share, I think is highly encouraged, because I know you've given me a little bit of a sample of some of the stories you've had and some of the jobs that you've had, and I definitely be thrilled to hear about any of those notable situations you've been in or jobs you've had.
Sure. Well, I mean, my first job was really for my dad, like when I was like under 10, and he had like a permit to sell outside a college football stadium in the Union, and he'd give me a commission to run one of the stands, and it taught me how to manage money and stuff. He used to give me like a 10% commission, and I was handling like hundreds and hundreds of bucks, like, and I was really young, and I'd kind of blow that on baseball cards and stupid stuff that a 10-year-old boy would buy, but or cassette tapes or whatever else. And then I was a really good high school student, but I wanted to work because I wanted money and I wanted music and I wanted to go to concerts and I wanted experiences. And for me, I've always kind of lived for experiences, and they wouldn't let me get a job till I was 15. And they had to drive me until I was 16. But yeah, I worked at that grocery store for like 5.5 years. And, like in hindsight, like I was actually treated really well, and that was like such a cool staff. And like, there's a lot of dudes that definitely like kind of tried and like helped like mentor me and taught me a lot of stuff. But I was also like young and cocky and, a teenager and like, not always super receptive, but, after I got in trouble and got arrested, like they still let me have my job even after I took a 60-day vacation, and like came back like nothing changed, but I needed like all this money to pay off bills, and so I got a second job, and that was at the record store. And once I had a taste of that, like the retail was definitely burning me out, and I knew this store was going to close soon. I knew I'd have a job offered at a different location, but it wasn't going to be the same management. It wasn't going to be the same staff. And I loved the record store. And I was going to college at the time. And even when I went to university out of state, they always let me, like, if I wanted 40 hours a week, they'd let me take off for a concert whatever days I wanted, or if I only wanted to work 4 days that week, I could take off for concerts whatever days I wanted. Like, they never turned anything down, and that's like such a crazy thing now, you know?
It is, yeah. That's pretty unheard of.
You could smoke cigarettes in the back room back then, and yeah, I mean, yeah, it was just so much more laid back. But you know, there weren't the cell phones, and there weren't the cameras, and there weren't whatever else. But you know, people weren't making as much either. But then, you know, wages were stagnant for a while after that. But I did the record store, and then like 6 months after that, like part of the record store, that manager was managing 2 stores, and she moved to another store, and pretty much I got laid off. I got severance and stuff, but I was like devastated because that was, you know, had been my favorite job at the time. I don't remember how long if I was there, if it was like 6 months or a year. And I quit the grocery, like just a phone call on a Sunday, and told him I wasn't coming in. He's like, ever again, or today? Because you can have today. You can have today off. And I was like, no, I think I'm done, man. Like, I have this other job, and I can't mentally do it anymore. It's like, you know, if you don't give us notice, like, I can't rehire you. He's like, I can still give you a reference, but
damn.
like, or do you want to reconsider or whatever? And that dude was like kind of a second dad to me at times, and he was kind of tough on me at times, but he was like really good to me, and I didn't appreciate it always. But
Sure.
yeah, I bailed on him, and then that job I bailed on him for like cut me like not too long after that. That's when everything was closing. I think I worked 5 places in a row that closed then. Some of them I was training to be like assistant manager, or there is one I think I was training to be store manager, but it just kept on happening where they closed. But I worked at this other record store that was actually my favorite store growing up, and that was the one that was more, I guess, like Empire Records. And closing that store, like, that was like extra traumatic because that one actually did like close while I was working, and I had to help close the store, and that was like the store I went to like growing up where I bought most of my records, and like
that's heartbreaking. It
was so emotional. But you know, I also like got to like take any of the promotional stuff that I wanted, and the amount of stuff that I got that I've sold over the years for that job that only paid $8 an hour, like paid way more. And it was just like stuff like promotional stuff they got for free, or stuff they were throwing away. Anytime they were like throwing away box, I'm like, no, I'll take that. Okay. Like, I'm still digging through some of that, but like there's some great posters, and the labels would send so much stuff. It was ridiculous. But when they did that, they're charging the band anyway. Like, that comes out of their budget. So like,
yeah. I mean, that's a huge perk for me. I was, you know, kind of I was a big music kid. I was a mall rat. And just pretty much I would hang out in FYE. You know, I would just like hang out at FYE all the time and get CDs, and then you know, sometimes the staff would throw freebies my way. But yeah, working at a record store sounds pretty rad. So, with all these stores closing and stuff, what was the time period for this? Was this like near the recession?
Yeah, I mean, like, I feel like 9/11, the music industry, and the recession, like, were kind of all tied together to me personally. You know, I graduated high school. You know, like 2 years, like, things are like, I don't know. When I started that grocery job, I think it was $4.25 an hour. But I could still make $1 or $2 tips an hour, like, as a busboy, like at 15 or whatever, like, or not busboy, bag boy, like running the groceries out. And then, like, by the time I was close to graduating high school, I was making like, I think $8.50 or $9.50 an hour, and I got paid like time and a half every Sunday anyway, and holidays. Then if you got paid if you worked it, and if you didn't work it, you got paid double time and a half. but again, like I didn't always appreciate that. But yeah, they're around that, and I worked at the first record store there. I was at on 9/11, and it just seemed like there was the music industry obviously like had kind of peaked basically 99, 2000, 2001.
Yeah.
It had hit its pinnacle. The downloading was like, I think it was overplayed that it was a problem, but it was more like the economy, like, there's this big kind of upswing in wages in, 4 years, and then it just, everything was stagnant for really 10 years. You know what I mean? Like in the place I was at, like that 950, like stayed at 950, 10, maybe 11 for like better part of next 5-10 years, depending on where you went. You know what I mean? And especially for like hospitality gigs or stuff like that.
Yeah. Like my last long-term hotel job that I was at for 2 years, I started out there like in 2019, the beginning of 2019 maybe, or 2018, and I started out at like 10.75 an hour, and this is only a few years ago, and then I left that place making like 16.50 an hour, and I mean still feeling extremely broke. So
yeah, the hospitality industry, like, I don't know. It was actually always something I kind of wanted to break into, but the market I was in, no one would hire me, and all my experience is retail and music stuff, and like no one took that real seriously or whatever.
Yeah.
Like,
how do you go from working in record stores to the hotel and hospitality?
It was basically, I had lost my housing. I had this guy crash into my house, and I obviously filed a police report, and during all that, the police realized that the landlord wasn't legally zoned to rent, and so the city basically contacted me, said if I didn't leave, they'd evict me, and I had like 60 days to leave, and I was in a place that had like no housing, and this house was awesome, and I had all that stuff in the record store too, plus my collection, which is like a ton of stuff. Like it's more than like usually a family of 4 has, like it's a lot. And I had to like pack it all up and find new housing, and I was in the city, and like it's the only place I could basically afford. I'd never been there before, but I did like know this one girl up there, and she like was gracious enough to like take me around, and like actually like the drive around, she showed me where stuff was. Like I was able to land a somewhat affordable place, and like that was one of the first places I applied. And I'd applied at hotels before, but I never got hired. But that dude took a chance on me, and after that, I think I've worked at 14 hotels now.
That's awesome. I mean, I really do think I'm pretty close to that. But I mean, for me though, I'm one of the guys who like, I honestly feel like part of like the interview is like me working at a place for like a week, or and then like figuring out how the environment is, because like I've had plenty of first days where I'm just like, yeah, there's no fucking way this is gonna work, and then I just leave.
Yeah, the hotels, like I've only had like really one that like I had to like quit after a few weeks. Like this is a shitstorm. Like there is no way. Like this is too dysfunctional.
Yeah.
Like the front desk does not have the resources it needs. Like there is no management. Like the housekeeping complaints are like valid. Like there is no way. Like I can't. You want me to explain why someone like pissed in these sheets and you didn't change them? Like, and you know what I mean? Like I don't.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. That's a fucking rough one. Yeah, you can't. I mean, there's no way to spin that.
Yeah. When they're like legit valid guest complaints, and you have to take that abuse, but you also have the empathy for it. But like obviously you didn't clean the room. You have nothing to do with that. You weren't even there. Like all that went down while you were like sleeping or before your shift started. Like, and like you don't inspect the rooms, whatever. But you take all that frontline assault, and that's what all these workers are doing. I think that's why a lot of these people have left it. And if the company is not going to offer you benefits, or it's not going to offer you flexible hours, or they're going to not let you take your vacation pay, or you don't have maternity or paternity leave, or you don't have like basic stuff that any other country it's basic, but here it's like some crazy socialist idea. Like I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
But
of course, people are gonna, flip out and no call, no show. I mean, it's always been a lot. It's always been stressful. I mean, the thing about hotels for me is that like there's a reason why I've kind of stuck around in hospitality and in hotels for such a long time. It's because, it kind of usually goes in bursts of activity. I mean, if you get a good place, you can chill, for a good chunk of your shift, and then, there's periods of activity and things you need to do, obviously, but the ratio was good for me. And then for me, when COVID hit, I never stopped working. I was just working straight through, and everybody else was laid off, and the hotel was still open. People still came to hang out, and it just got worse and worse and worse. Obviously, because we could not accommodate the guests in the same way with only like 3 people on staff. So
yeah, I was like. So I was already kind of like at my wit's end with management at this hotel I was at right before COVID. But it like at the same time, it was like probably the nicest property I worked at. The guests were amazing. A lot of them were like owner guests or people you'd see every 4 months, and like they were very generous, bringing you food to $50 bills to like. Never felt that more appreciated at any property. Not from management, just from the actual guests, but still. And then you're looking out like gorgeous, like Lake Michigan, and like I don't know. But I was ready to quit, and I got fired first. And that was like we had just closed and then reopened, and like there's protocols in place that weren't getting followed, and management like didn't care about anything, and like I just did not want to deal with the management. It wasn't even the guests as much, but I sat that out, and I basically hustled my stuff online just enough to skate by during that time, and that I'm happy I had that.
Yeah, no, for sure. So yeah, I mean, you kind of jump into hotels, and was it kind of like you just focused on hotels for years until kind of that last job, and then you kind of jumped into more of a multiple gig lifestyle, or was it always something? Did you always do other things on the side?
Yeah, I kind of like always had side hustles. Like even before I started selling on like eBay and Amazon and Discogs. I think I started there maybe like 2005. I still like sold to other stores and bought and resold stuff locally, or like garage sale stuff, and like just I don't know, I had an eye for stuff, or I knew it to like take and hoard for 10 years and then flip when the time was right, or just make some instinct, but yeah, like a good investment. And after I closed my store, like I'd always had X amount of income online. It definitely dried up to hundreds of dollars, but there's a time where it was a couple $1,000s or more. Sure. And more when I had my store, but I've been able to live really cheap in the last few years, so I mean a few $100s can kind of pay most of my bills, surprisingly, and luckily and gracefully and fortunately.
Yeah, no, I mean it can float you along when you need time to figure out the next thing, which I think is like if you are a job jumper, it's helpful to have kind of like a life raft, I guess. So 14 hotel jobs. How are you quitting these jobs? Like, do any reasons why you quit or any quitting experiences come to mind? Like, or was it just like, okay, I'm moving, or I've done my time? And
I mean, I'd say I got fired for like 3 of them.
Nice.
I definitely like got offered a better situation and just bounced on one. The other one, I was like going to leave mid shift, and then she came in and fired me first. But like I gave her I gave her the courtesy call.
Okay. So you like said, hey, I'm gonna quit. I'm gonna leave if you don't come in.
I had presented a problem, and she'd been ignoring it, and like guests were complaining about it, and I said, if you're not going to do anything about this, like I'm gonna like bounce, like,
Yeah.
and she still wouldn't address it, and then like, oh, I'll come down there, and then she did come down there, and she just fired me. So
oh my God. I mean, I
had been there like a year or two, and like I did almost like 70% of the front desk shifts, and I'd been like managing the front desk basically for the last year and a half.
Yeah.
So, but I also like didn't like me and her butted heads, and I just didn't care anymore. Like she was just a horrible manager, and like probably a worse person. Like so.
Yep, I have managers that are coming to mind right away after you said that. So we've all had that person. Was she
with the hotels though? Like, oh, I was gonna say every hotel I left, like I made more at the next one. And at least that industry, like people are still dogging on it, but like we were talking about both of us, like I think I started mine at like 8 or 8.50, at a time when most jobs are paying 10 or 12 at least,
Yeah.
And the last hotel job I was making 18.50. So
Nice. Yeah, it's one of those industries where the old saying like, oh, people are always going to need beds to sleep in, like that is true. It's maybe the scope of it will go away someday, but yeah, it's a pretty reliable industry at least.
I think it depends on the property too, because there are some properties that are really awesome, and like most of the guests are like problem free. But some of those chain ones, like you have to really, you got sports teams staying there or whatever else. Like it can be a nightmare.
It can be, yeah. Yeah, you get drunk parents in the lobby, just making you babysit their kids who are running
or people ODing.
Yeah,
finding drugs, calling the cops all the time, and like knowing the officers because you work at the hotel, not because they've arrested you or anything, just because. Oh yeah, I know him from the hotel. Yeah, we were up there earlier today. Oh, good to see you again. Like
exactly. Yeah, I mean that was my last hotel job I was talking about. It was it was an extended stay property, and so we had a lot of long-term guests, and pretty much what ended up happening is like our general manager kind of like fucked off and didn't really want to do anything, and so we ended up with a lot of these long-term guests who were just staying and not paying. And in the state that I'm in, if you occupy a room for 30 days, you're like
become a resident.
A resident, yeah. And
yep.
So there was always a lot of conflict between management and the people that didn't pay, and they happen to be the same people who you would need to help, or got the cops called on them or whatever. I never had any issue really with the people. They were nice. I don't I'm not gonna say like. I think anybody could find themselves in that kind of situation, and whatever, you got to survive. But some of the shit I saw, it's etched in my brain with ODs and domestic violence situations. Yep. It's a lot.
I worked at a property where they actually set up a meth lab in like 48 hours in one of the rooms. And then they filled this adjacent room to it, and I don't know who checked them in. It was not my shift. I was audit, and this is second shift. But they filled the entire adjacent room from floor to ceiling with stolen merchandise, like bicycles and saws and like just random stuff. And anyway, the cops like actually raided it, and they actually got charged with like maintaining a meth facility. And they didn't do any hazmat cleaning. They didn't do anything else, and they just wanted to rent out their room.
Oh my
God. like I at the desk like mentally put that as like rent last or whatever. Or if there's like a kid or like kid and parent, like there's no way I'm just going to tell them it's sold out. You know, I'm not going to put you in that room. But their property like didn't care. Same, the fire doors go out. Oh, we'll just prop them open, even though that's like against the law. Like
it's all about heads and beds.
Yep.
I mean, this property that I was at, my last 2 months there, we had an issue with our fire panel, and the corporate didn't want to pay to fix it. They're like, oh, there has to be a cheaper way. And so while they were, figuring that out, being cheapskates and trying to come up with some sort of cheap solution to replacing the whole fire panel, I was in charge of like walking the hallways to doing fire patrol overnight, because they did not want to pony up and hire security to do it or to just replace the fire panel. It was an absolute nightmare.
I've actually worked like quite a few fires. Like, some were just like the kitchen or smoke, but some were like the tree or property was just about to go out smoke, so I actually did use an extinguisher or put out stuff outside. But there's this one hotel I worked at, and that was actually the first hotel job I had, and it was a Days Inn, and it was adjacent to another hotel. I think maybe a Baymont. Anyway, yeah, I've worked at one Baymont.
I think I worked.
That was it. The one I worked at was actually a good property, good management. Yeah. But anyway, the dude had the property side by side, and basically one of them started it on fire, and they called the fire department, and they like put it out or whatever, and then the insurance is like, oh, it's not a total damage, it's just like the downstairs floors. And they're like, what? Like or it's not a total loss. Anyway, during all that time, the fire department's supposed to sit there for 24 hours to make sure it doesn't restart. Mm-hmm. They didn't, and it did, and then it did fully burn down. Oh. And so the dude was like sued the city. I'm not gonna say this. Yeah, I'm not gonna say the city's name, but yeah, no, he sued the city, and I believe it was the city and maybe fire department too, or they're probably connected. But he won anyway, and so the insurance payout or whatever, they go to pay him out, and they didn't realize like both properties were attached to the same deal, and so it paid off both properties.
Wow, that must be a major regret for that fire department. I mean, just a whole lot of short-sightedness.
Yeah, I want to say that property might have burned down again, though. That one was cursed, dude. Like that thing, that was cursed. And I think there might have been a fire before the one before that. But I've seen, like, I don't know, people take that for granted, and like knowing where your extinguishers are, or, like walking the halls, or But I've seen just the fire panel go off too, or when it does go off, it is a fire, and they're like, "Is this real?" Like no one. No, everyone's just blasé, like,
there's no training about, like...
I've seen them do that, and there's, like, almost black smoke down the hallway. And I'm like, dude, like...
Yeah.
Yes, leave now.
Exactly, I know. I mean, my favorite thing is like, when the fire panel goes off and the alarm's ringing, and then you get a million phone calls to the front desk, like... Oh, should I come down? Yeah, fucking of course you should come down. That's the fire alarm. Do you not know what that is?
It's not just the one outside your room. Don't worry. It's the whole property. Yeah, and yes, that's what that is.
Yeah, that's the fucking funniest thing to me. So as far as hotels, like, what do you think your best experience was, and what would you think your worst experience in the hotel business would be over the years?
Oh, I mean, I've worked at a lot of properties where I feel like I did my job and whatever, and I got fired for real petty or no reason at all, or management changed or
Did you get unemployment?
whatever. But in some cases, no, not up here. I only got, I think, unemployment once. Like when I lived farther south, like their state is more right to work than up here, though.
Gotcha.
But I don't know. And usually I just shake those off. I fought one really hard and still lost. But with that, like, you usually get stable hours. You don't necessarily get good hours, but and you have to work a lot of holidays and stuff. But you can yeah, but they're stable. You know what I mean? Like,
yes,
yeah, they're stable. Depending on what shift you work, how busy you are, like you can maybe listen to music, watch sports on the TV, take smoke breaks, watch entire series on Netflix, like you're talking about on Audit.
Yeah.
I've worked ones where you played video games. I've worked ones where the manager, like, legit actually, like, fucking was cool. Like, I could sleep. He gave me the blessing. I just needed to be by the phone, and if it rang, I'd wake up. And it wasn't, like, full rate. It was, like, $8 an hour. But other times when it was full rate, he didn't care if I, like, crashed in the office. Stuff like that is, like, kind of cool. So a shift like that, like, where you literally go to work, you go to bed, and then you wake up, and you just, like, set up breakfast and you're gone in 2 hours, and then you get to eat the breakfast. Like, oh yeah, that eating the breakfast, I would say, like, yeah, setting it up, not as much, but not having to take it down. Like, if you leave before all that, that's great. Like,
I know, yeah. I mean, breakfast for me was always it was never something that I had to do until I had to do it. Like, I was never formally trained on it because when I first started out, I was just working, usually 7 to 3 or 3 to 11. So, it was only when the breakfast guy called out that I was thrust into the kitchen. They're like, "You got to make these eggs." Like, I've never done this before. But then COVID happened, and the hotels I worked at after COVID had a very, very streamlined, breakfast process, and it was just so freaking easy. It was just a piece of cake. So I didn't mind it after that. Now
I hate in general working at properties that have breakfast because all people do is complain about it.
Yes.
No matter what it is, and they always like, well, why don't you have this or this? And what I'll say is I'll pretty much list everything we have, and it's like seriously a list of 20 or 30 things, and then I go, what do you eat at home? And they pause and like they can't like, I don't know, like. Yeah. But yeah, no, I mean it is what it is, but that's kind of an American thing too. Like overseas, that's $25 or $50 a person, like extra. You don't get free breakfast.
Yeah.
The property, the last one I worked at, I will say they actually have like this lady comes in and they have their own kitchen and they like actually have like legit stuff, and I've never actually heard a complaint the entire season I worked there about the breakfast.
That's these days for sure.
You're right.
Usually it's all just prepackaged bullshit and like liquid eggs, and I mean it's just the grossest of gross.
Yeah, that place absolutely used real eggs too. So
that's, I mean, they may be expensive these days, but
yeah. That was last summer. Who knows this summer?
Program. John, I want to ask you, how do you deal with being stuck in a miserable work environment? What's your coping mechanism?
Music, maybe, like maybe taking breaks, probably some marijuana. I don't. I think I think I have my limits, and that's why it winds up being job hopping, because you're like, oh, I can put up with this for a month or 3 months, or I don't know. It sounds like you've worked at enough hotels too, where you like the ship is going well, and then like, I don't know, say 1 or 3 months before you see like all the chaos, like you smell it out ahead of time, and you're already like, oh yeah, like the whole staff is going to change, or like it's going to completely eat shit. And that's like, you have your level of what that is before you bounce.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
over time, that level for me has just gotten astronomically smaller. like,
Yeah.
like I just you have to put your foot down and say I'm worth more than that. Like bet on
Definitely.
yourself. And with the side hustles too. Like I would rather, if I'm gonna make like the same amount of money net and work way less hours, why wouldn't I do that? Like I just don't understand, especially maybe you can get insurance through the marketplace, maybe you can't. Depends on, if you have kids or childcare and everything else. But there's, a lot of situations where, and you don't got to wait the weeks to get paid. I don't know. It's just good to have the different options. But, there's so many places where I worked at for a year or 2 years, and then that time came and it closed, or I never got my vacation, or management changed, or you're not guaranteed anything.
I know. Yeah, it's like you get a new district manager, and then it's like, I don't know about this one, and they always come in and they want to change everything, just like little small dumb things, like, and it's a slippery slope after that happens.
Aldi was one of my worst. Like, I don't know. Like, I had like a really horrible experience there, and I hear like some stores are great to work at.
Aldi?
But yeah, but mine sucked, and like they want you available all hours, at their will between like 5 a.m. and 9 or 10 p.m. And so you come in before the store's open, and you throw truck, and you get all sweaty, and then you have to like go up and deal with customers and like bring out their stuff super fast, where you're basically like throwing their shit in the cart. And the company policy is like, oh, if you break it, just have them go get another one. Like, yeah, you go tell that to most customers. Yeah, I just broke your shit because I'm being ordered to ring this like so quick, where I need like 50 items a minute. Yeah, I know. But then, see how that goes. See how that goes over with the customer. You know what I mean?
I'm just asking. Like, I didn't know that.
And they have to walk all the way back there again.
That's crazy.
But I just I hated it, man. And I was like finally like ready to leave the city I was in the state I was in, and I just needed to find a place. Like I finally like had gotten just enough money to do it, but I've been looking like 3 months and I couldn't find it. And I just didn't care anymore. And I was like actually kind of trying to get fired. And they wouldn't do it. Like I was showing up late, but I always did a good job and stuff, but I hated my manager. Just hated my manager. He was just such a douche. And he would like, you have to check the items back into a cart, right? Like we know that you put the quarter in the cart or whatever, but that means like there's always like there should be at least always an extra cart in, because the customer is going to take the cart that was there previous.
Yes.
So it's like you need to start the shift with that. Well, the manager was always a cheap asshole, and he would like straight up like return those and then pocket the change. So you'd start your shift with your till, and then you'd have to go out of your till, go all the way, and go get the cart yourself. And so like I'm fuming because he does this all the time. I've literally seen him do it. And the door you have to go like all the way out to get in the carts, because the exit is like it doesn't tunnel through the entrance. So and I'm starting my shift, and there's seriously like a line of like 18 people, and I go out there to get a cart, and like I'm going pretty quick, and this dude in front of me is like walking, and then he just stops in the middle of the entryway for no reason, and I definitely like hit his ankle with the cart, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, man. And he's like, fuck you, asshole, or something. I was like, you need to pay more attention. I said, you need to not stop in the middle of the fucking door. And dude fucking got super pissed off, and like I'd actually had blowouts with customers there like 3 times, like people yelling, screaming. They would not fire me, and like I own a couple of them. I definitely could have handled them better, but probably would have gotten fired most places for that. I don't know that I do those now. I just didn't care anymore. Anyway, my manager is there, and he comes and tries to. The one that I'm cool with comes to try to diffuse the situation. And the store manager, who I hate, is also there. And he comes into the office, pulls me into the office, which is like just right outside the check stand, and he's screaming at me at the top of his lungs. And he's like actually the tallest guy I've ever worked for. He was like seriously like legit like 7 foot, and he's like shaking, and he has his hand on his blade, dude. And I'm like seriously like scared, like legit scared, and I don't know what to do, and I'm explaining the situation, and he's like, "Oh, you just did that on purpose. You just did that on purpose. You're just trying to do this. I want to fire you so bad, and I can't. I want to fire you so bad, and I can't." And I knew that to be the case because the way they did it there is only the district manager could. Oh. And so he was a store manager, and he didn't have the ability to fire me. So I straight up tortured him all the time, dude. I was such a douche. But fuck him anyway. Anyway, so that's happening, and like the entire store can hear the stuff. And he's screaming, "I want to fire you so bad, and I just fucking can't. I hate you. You're such a..." I don't know if he said piece of shit or what, but like I was like my response was like I was shaking a little bit because I didn't want him to like stab me, but I was also like my reflexes were to laugh because it was so funny, and I just like completely melted this dude down. Anyway, it turns out the district manager happens to be there too, and that we're talking about district managers. So she comes storming into the office, and like, you know, the whole store can hear this, and it's like, "Oh my God," like, and she separates us. And so she tells me not to clock out and sit in my car and calm down. And she has a talk with him. Anyway, their solution is to not schedule us at the same time, and I'll just ride out my time until I start my new life in my new state. And that's how it ended. But yeah, they would not schedule me with the store manager. But dude, it was awesome though, because like he couldn't fire me, and I wouldn't steal or anything like that. Like I wouldn't do anything like that by any means. My till was always on, but I would definitely show up 15, 20, 30, 40 minutes late sometimes, or I'd definitely like be really rude to a customer that was rude back to me. Like I, you know, bring the same energy. You know, I didn't try to run over that guy's foot. I apologized. I felt horrible. But when he told me, "Oh, you need to fucking, you know, pay more attention or whatever," like, why would you stop in the middle of the door like that? You know, that's only wide enough for one person to get through, you know? Like, a sliding door that opens and closes, too. Like, what if the sensor didn't go off? That straight hits you, dude. Like,
I mean, people are just unaware. Like, you know, that, I mean, whenever I go to Aldi to shop, people do the same fucking thing. It's just, I mean, but that's cool. You kind of ended it on having like a little bit of immunity from the boss. That's a pretty cool way to go.
I hear he actually had a meltdown and like left like not long after which I don't know why I'm laughing at, but he found a better job. He found a better situation. It was probably good for him too. You know what I mean? Like he was.
He sounded like he was at wit's end at that store. I don't think it was just.
Oh, he was, but I'm sure he was making 6 figures too. Like I'm sure he was doing well. Like
that's a good point. Damn, that was a good one. As we wrap up, I want to ask if at this point in your life, and you're doing a lot of different things now, do you feel like you escaped jumping from shitty job to shitty job, or do you think you're still in the thick of it? And if so, do you think it's possible to escape once you're in that kind of cycle?
It's possible to escape, but I'm definitely in the thick of it, you know. Like right now, I'll probably go back to the job I had last season, but that has a new manager too, and this job that was perfect last season might not be this season, you know what I mean? But to me, it's more like if I add up all my revenue channels, you know, and I get X amount net, and even after you add in expenses and taxes and all that, if I'm going to make more working less, and I'm not necessarily gaining health insurance, or it's not costing me any different having it or not having it, or I'm still in the marketplace or I'm not, or whatever, why would I want to give someone full-time hours and whatever hours they demand, you know what I mean? Like, I like to just work whenever I want to, like having that freedom, or like just, you know, taking a week off and going out of town. Or if you're out of town and you can still hustle, if you're doing a gig app or other things, you know, your income doesn't necessarily shut off. Like, but with that, like it's I think especially with the online selling, like going to the post office every day, like that is like one of the biggest battles, like, you know, especially right before Christmas or during the holidays or that. But then, you know, if you're working a gig app, you can get paid to go to the post office then. So like literally you're double dipping there. And that was the other thing I loved about hotels, because I can, you know, do eBay or Amazon or Discogs while I'm at the hotel. I am getting paid, and I would bring in stacks of CDs or records or whatever and just list them while I was there, you know?
Yeah, that's a great case of double dipping right there. Yeah, you can do you know, a side hustle. Well, I mean, I've actually heard about these. There's like a new movement for like work from home people where they get like 2 or 3 work from home jobs and they just do them all concurrently, because like they're all like, you know, kind of easy.
I've seen that.
Multitask.
I had a buddy during the pandemic that pulled that though, and he was working for like a Fortune 500 company, and he was double dipping and raking it, and he actually like got caught doing it and got fired.
Yeah, it seems like it could probably go wrong pretty easily, but yeah, you know.
Most of the hotel managers that I've worked at, like that's the cool flex though, because that's a selling point for them, because if they're like cool with like they have a back office or it's night audit and they don't care if it's at the desk or maybe whatever, the situation is different. Like some of them are like, oh yeah, you bring in your stuff, you know, they work on your school. Why can't you work on that? Or you want to, maybe you like to read or watch movies. Like
100%.
The best jobs are like working as few hours as possible, dealing with as few people as possible, getting to do your hobbies. Right. I mean,
exactly. That's my big thing is I like a job where I can like have room to dream. Like I need space to like daydream, you know, and like not just be on edge the entire 8 hours about what's going to happen next. So that was always my preference. Last but not least, John, what would your life look like if you did not need to work and all of your needs were met? What would your ideal day-to-day life look like?
I think I'd be more organized. Like I'd have my record and CD collection and all these posters that have never been unboxed since they're tubed up years ago, like actually displayed. But you know, I thought with COVID too that it would be different if I had like all my time to put into my hobbies or whatever. But there's this battle of complacency, right? You know, like you make enough for the day, or you don't have any like hard deadlines, and like I caught myself getting really complacent sometimes, like not even just in my work but in relationships. And you have to, I don't know, but to me the day-to-day would just be having my house and or place set up with my music collection, listen to music, and you know, maybe having a puff or watching some sports, playing sports, just going hiking, camping, but being in a location where you're one with nature and kind of away from people. But I used to be this big city kid, and I just could never imagine living in a small town, and now I just can't really ever imagine going back to a city. The idea of having to wait at stoplights still pisses me off when I leave here. Like the amount of time wasting that I used to all the time, just going down 10 blocks in the street, like just blows my mind.
That's a good point. There's so much wasted time in cities. It's pretty insane. That's a different form of tax. You know, it's like being taxed in time. You know, you're losing minutes of your life having to commute.
For sure, and some of those cities too. Like people are like, oh, I wouldn't commute. I think the average commute's 25, 30 minutes, but some of those people are only commuting 5 to 15 miles. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like in 30, 40 minutes, I can commute like 30 or 40 miles. Like, yeah, fine. You know what I mean? Like that's. And it's all the situation, though.
Cities that have public transportation, you know, like it's not usually. I mean, usually most cities don't have very good transport, so you're wasting a lot of time too, because it's like it's kind of designed to be inefficient, you know, which is unfortunate. It could be so much better, but
yeah, there's too many places. If you don't have a car, your opportunities are extremely limited.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that's the other situation why one of those summer gigs or those gigs that I was talking about, like in some of these resort towns where maybe you lose your housing, maybe you lost your car, maybe you lost your spouse, or maybe you lost everything.
Yeah.
Maybe you need a roof over your head. You're willing to start. People won't give you a chance in your market, but they will here. You know what I mean? Or they will somewhere else, and that's the fresh start some people need. You know.
That's a great point. I think those opportunities are great for people who need kind of a clean slate. So I feel like we have barely scratched the surface of your experience, and I think that of course, because I feel like you've been through a lot and you've got a lot of stories to tell. So I'm gonna say, maybe sometime in the future, I would love to have you back on to talk more about your job jumping story, but. I think it's been an awesome conversation. I've loved to hear your insight and your thoughts on everything you've done. Was there anything that you wanted to cover before we close it down for the night, John?
I would just say, like, there's kind of this stigma, and maybe it's more of a boomer mentality, but like, where if your resume has holes in it, or if you do that, like, we keep getting hired. You know what I mean? Like, I can feel like I can talk my way into any interview. Like, I will expire eventually,
Yeah.
But there are markets that are way more open to hiring seniors. Some of it's about putting yourself in a better situation, even if that place might not be ideal for you. But don't be afraid to quit. And once you quit one, I think you start believing in yourself more and seeing your self-worth and your self-value more, that you set strict boundaries with employers and limitations, and you kind of go from there. You know what I mean? Boundaries are important, and it's okay to say no.
100%.
And if someone takes advantage of you or fucks them, is it bad ghosting them? And how many times have you ever been fired with the hotel giving a notice? You give the notice and then they don't let you work it out?
Yeah, absolutely.
Have you ever? Yeah, see, that's real common in hotel industry, but like, people forget about that too. Like, like, when you do the right, I did that one time, and I was moving, and after I told you I was like pretty much kicked out by the city, and I finally found the housing, like, that job pulled that for me, so I had less income there, and I thought I was doing the right thing. And if I was in that situation again, I'd never tell them. I wouldn't tell them until that day was over. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because you got to take care of yourself sometime, and you don't show loyalty to someone that's not going to be loyal to you.
Yep.
It's okay to say no, and I don't know. Bet on yourself and believe in yourself, and it's okay to be selfish too. And it's okay to do unconventional things, but have boundaries. And if 9 to 5 isn't your gig, do something else. And even like the gig economy, like, it's never meant to be a long-term thing, but it's something you can spring off or kind of get you through while you're trying to find your calling. But don't be afraid to try different things either. And right now in this economy, like, there are places that would have required college years ago, or would have required 2 years experience, or would have required whatever. And they're paying for experience. They're paying for whatever. And if you want to try something, do it. Because this is, we talked a little about our age gap, but dude, this is, even with the stuff probably about to hit the fan a little bit here in the next year, this is still the best economy I've ever seen in my life. Like, since the 90s for sure. And just having the opportunity to just go and, be in demand, and there are more jobs than people, and all the boomers pieced out. So
exactly.
Like, finally they're giving us a chance to do our thing.
We have the upper hand right now, a little bit more flexibility for the workers. Everything you just said, I agree 100%. I'm a huge proponent of betting on yourself, and if a situation isn't serving you, if a job isn't serving you, you can get the fuck out of there and don't feel guilty for a second, because you are absolutely right. It's the world we live in is these companies are not going to go to bat for you 9 times out of 10. And
one more point real quick. If there's kind of that stigma too of, like, we talked about not putting in the notice or whatever else, or planning it out and having another job first. Like, yeah, in a perfect world, everyone would like to have another job first, but they don't always have the time because they're working too much, or
Yes.
they can't go to the interview because they're at their other job. But my experience sometimes, like when I've just quit a job, like walked out in the middle of a shift, or gotten fired, or ghosted, or just quit and wasn't expecting it that day and didn't have a job at the end of the day, and I didn't get fired, or I did get fired and I was expecting having a job at the end of the day. Like, I was always able to find something else really quickly, and sometimes it's because your back is against the wall and you have to. You know what I mean? It pushes you for change a lot more than trying to do it comfortably and trying to find the right situation. Because then you just get complacent in your current situation and you don't have the balls to make the change. And I think you're better off just, even if that's the thing, like having your back against the wall. Some people perform best that way. I do.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people are in that same boat. I certainly do as well. When your back is against the wall, you kind of can do things you normally wouldn't do, and especially right now in this environment, like you were saying, I think it's best to take advantage of it. Don't stay in a job that makes you miserable. It's not worth it.
If you can pick up a new skill, though, or you want to try something else and someone will give you a chance, this is the way to do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
That's not always the case. So, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a really great positive note to go out on. John, I want to thank you again for your time and your story. And I definitely would be interested in talking with you again, sometime in the future, because I feel like there's a lot of things we didn't get into. But I know you're on the down low, anonymous. But did you want to plug anything or shout anything out before we wrap it up?
Not really. I think just like don't be afraid to make the moves, and don't be afraid for change, and don't be afraid to try things, and also don't be afraid to fail. I'm not in a perfect situation now. I'm not like super stable killing it, but I'm happier than I've been in my whole life,
Yeah,
so like there's something that goes with that, and I'm still not saying like I don't get depressed at times or have struggles, like, but I'm still like mentally better than.
Yeah.
There's nothing more mentally draining than a job that just sucks your soul away. It makes you not want to do anything, go anywhere, or do anything. Like, It's bad.
Absolutely.
Don't do it. You're better than that.
100%. Well, thank you so much, and we'll talk again soon.
Sounds good.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. Hope you enjoyed our conversation. Thank you again to John for all of the insight and all of the wacky stories. If you want to be a part of Job Jumpers, folks, if you want to guest on the show and tell me your job jumping story, or if you just want to send me your story in written form so I can read it on the show, please don't hesitate. You can email me at jobjumperspod@gmail.com. I would love to hear from you. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at jobjumperspod. We're on all podcast platforms, so please subscribe, rate, review, all that good stuff. And most importantly, keep jumping.